When I was in college, a buddy of mine and I climbed Long's Peak, the tallest mountain in the Rockies. And as we began, we were feeling confident, passing lesser hikers, traversing snow-covered ledges in nothing but t-shirts and sweatpants and our Timberlands. But as we got towards the top, something changed. Suddenly, we both began to feel weak and drained and nauseous. And then finally, at one point, both of us just collapsed. And I remember at that moment, we were worried. We can't get down. And we began to pray. And I don't remember who prayed it. I just remember somebody prayed, "Oh God, we are so stupid." Because we were completely drained and we're like, we can't get ourselves out of this situation. But while we were praying, suddenly from down across the trail, I saw this older guy walk up to us, and he walked up and was like, "Hey guys," like real peppy. And he's like, "Have y'all been to the top?" And I was like, "No, man, we're not doing good." And he was like, "You gotta go." And then he stopped and went, "Wait a second. You're the college guys who came up here without equipment." He said, "We're in awe of you. You're crazy." And then he said something about God protecting the ignorant. I don't know. I wasn't really paying attention. But then he was like, "Man, you've got to get to the top." And I just told him, "We're too drained. We can't get there." And I remember as I said that to him, he looked at us, and as he sized us up, I'll never forget, he said, "Well, first off, boys, you're breathing all wrong." And I was like, "I don't think that's our problem. I think it's that we're freezing and in t-shirts." But he said, "No, you're breathing wrong." And I said, "I think I know how to breathe. Like I got that figured out." And he said, "Not up here, you don't." He said, "The atmosphere has changed. And so you have to change if you want to survive and thrive." And I think about that story a lot because that's true for all of us. Socially, in the world today, the atmosphere has changed, particularly over the last decade or so as it relates to technology. And these changes in technology have affected the atmosphere socially, and often we don't even see it, but it's affecting the vibrancy of our young people and the way we journey along together. That since the advent of the internet, and more specifically, iPhones, smartphones that we can carry around the World Wide Web everywhere, the data is now in, that all this connectivity has given us less community. That there's self-reported awkwardness among young people today. And what that's creating is a world where we communicate with each other less. And as a part of that, there's been less hanging out with friends, and therefore less dates, and therefore less marriage, and therefore less sex, and therefore less children. So that now we're seeing around the world today, birth rates are falling in some nations below the replenishment rate. And there have been studies recently that have shown a direct correlation between the introduction of the internet into a country and precipitously falling birth rates. That the world has changed and the human race is changing because all of our connectivity has come at the cost of community. We spend less time together hanging out. And some of you hear this and you go, "Well, Ben, what does this have to do with dating? I thought we were on the dating section on who you should date." And I go, "Yeah, but before we talk about the pairing off of two people, which is good, we have to talk about how to relate to people in general." And the reality is, you are made for community. We're hardwired for it. God said it in Genesis. After he created Adam, he said it's not good for this man to be alone. And some people may read that and go, "What do you mean alone? He's with you, God. It's a perfect quiet time, 24 hours a day." But you look at God himself, and God is three persons in one. He is Trinity. God is a party. God is three people enjoying each other, caring for one another. God is love. And he looks at this singular consciousness and says, "That's not good. You are meant to share and exchange with others to be all that you're meant to be." God's rigged it that way. I mean, think about it. When we want to punish somebody, we put them in solitary confinement. That putting someone alone is a form of punishment. Why? Because we know it will make them crazy. They'll start talking to volleyballs and losing their mind. Like, it's not good for us mentally to be alone. And God has rigged it that way. He told the Ephesians in Ephesians 4, God gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets and evangelists and shepherds and teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for the building up of the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. That you can't be fully who you're meant to be in God without us. One of God's greatest gifts he's given us is us. We need a community. Now, this is what's important. We need it, and we need to know this. Communities form around causes. Communities form around causes. We commune around common interests. No one unifies around unity. You always unify around something, be it a shallow something or a tremendous something, whatever it may be. That's what draws us together. And however enduring the thing is, usually dictates how enduring the relationship is. So think about it. You may have had some friends back in the day, and you go, we were all friends because we were all bored in a small town. But now I don't live in that small town. Now I'm not bored, and so we don't really hang out. Or, hey, we used to all play this sport together, and now I don't play that sport, so I haven't talked to that person in years. Or, oh man, we used to all talk about this show, but now that show's over, we don't really talk about anything. We form community around a common interest, and when the interest goes, often the community goes. But if you can build your community around something enduring, the more enduring the cause, the more enduring the community. And if you can build your community around an eternal cause, then you might just have a community that will last not just through the end of your life, but racing on into forever. That's what Paul experienced, that his happiest letter was to the Philippians, and he called them the fellowship of the gospel. We have communion, we have a sense of family, and it's built around the good news of Jesus, that Jesus is building a family, and our communion is around the eternal Son of God. And so he loved them. And what was great about that is not just that they all had the same cause, but because their cause was Jesus, he was also shaping their character. That to be around him is to be like him. And so as Paul is celebrating them, he says, you know what? Jesus is humble, and so we're all humble in the way we treat each other. That Jesus wasn't a grumbler, and we're not grumbling. We have positivity because we have hope in him. Hey, we're not an anxious people, nervous and fraught. We can encourage each other because we have the peace that comes from Jesus. And he looked around and says, man, I have a community that has the same cause and that has a God-shaped character. Now, you may hear all that and go, Ben, still, man, I thought this was about dating. Like, when are you going to start talking about who we should date? Well, let me say this here. Whenever someone asks me what kind of person should I date, I tell them you want three things. Number one, you want them to have the same cause as you. That you want to be going the same direction in your life. As you look at couples, why do many of them say they divorce? They say it's because our lives went different directions. What are they talking about? They're not talking about career decisions. It's not like, well, he's a lawyer and I'm a librarian and we have nothing in common. It's not about career. It's about ultimate value-shaping decisions. What do we think is the most important thing in existence? So you want to be united with someone who has the same cause, and you want to be united with someone who has character, that you can trust them, that when you put your life in their hands, you know they're not going to hurt me. They're not going to say cruel things. They're not going to physically abuse me. They're not going to leave me. That they're going to be there for better or for worse, in sickness and in health. Before you start getting infatuated with somebody, you want to know, is our life going the same direction? And can I trust them? Do we have the same cause? And do they have character? Now listen to what I just said. If you make the decision socially now to get around a community, and I would take it a step further, to get around a church, not one where you're all just sitting around, but a church where you're chasing the cause of Jesus, shaped by the character of Jesus. You get around a community like that, you have dramatically improved the quality of your dating pool. Now you're surrounded by people chasing the same cause with a God-shaped character. Now all you're looking for is that third piece, chemistry. Do they make me laugh? Do they have dimples? Whatever it is you're into. Now you're just looking for, do we have a chemistry that connects? And you want those three things, a cause and a community that's shaped by God's character, and you want chemistry. You want those things. It's interesting. I read a book not long ago by Aziz Ansari about modern dating. And in the book, he was talking to so many young people, and the book made me so sad because as he was talking to them, they were saying things like, man, dating is stressful and depressing. And I'm like, man, you're meeting somebody you might love the rest of your life. That should be combined with words like amazing and exciting and fun, but it's all words like dread and anxious and depressing. And as he interviewed focus groups, they'd say things like, I'm just swiping on someone that I don't know anything about and having meaningless chit-chat if I don't know where our lives are going. And yet in the middle of his book, there's a guy that stood out as a bright, shining light. so different that Aziz points him out and says he's like no one else in this generation. And he uses a lot of words to describe him I can't use here because they were very inappropriate. But this whole focus group began to turn and look at and focus on him and say, what is it you're doing that's so different than the rest of the culture? And they asked him about his last couple dates. And do you know who he dated? People that he had met. I think one was on a mission trip with him and one was involved in his church. That he was in an entirely different stream he was swimming in, and that gave him an entirely different quality of experience as he looked at who he was going to date. People with a God-shaped cause, a God-chiseled character, and people with whom I have chemistry. That's where you want to be. And so it's fascinating. I'll talk to young people all the time who want to date and they're frustrated. They say, where can I find a good man or a good woman? It's like they don't exist anymore, and they compare him to a unicorn. They're like a good person's like a mythical creature that doesn't really exist. And I would say to you, they're not like a unicorn. They're like a kangaroo. And you might be looking for one in Wyoming. There might be a kangaroo in Wyoming. I don't know. I doubt there's many. But there's tons of kangaroos in Australia. And so when people say, I can't find a good person, I say, you might be in the wrong state. You might be on the wrong continent. They are out there, so don't get discouraged as you're looking around and starting to think, maybe it's just a myth. Is there really such a thing as a kangaroo, a pouch, really? Marsupial, you say? You go, yes, they're really there. You're just in the wrong state. And so for some people, I'm not saying move states. I'm not saying move continents, although some of you might want to think about it. But I'm just saying you may need to move social spheres. That you look around and say, I'm with a community that's not going anywhere. I'm hanging out with people that don't have a passion for Jesus like I do. I'm in a community that's not supporting and building each other up to be the best version of ourselves. And I would encourage you, you need to get into a different stream, improve the quality of your dating pool. It's fascinating. In the book of Genesis, the longest chapter is the chapter about finding a wife. God cares about your marriage and your dating life, I would say, more than you do. And the number one parameter Abraham, the father of our faith, gives to his servant as he trusts his servant to help find a wife for his son is he says, don't get him a wife from among the Canaanites. That as Abraham looked around their social sphere, he says, this group of people does not have the same allegiance to God my son has, and they are not being shaped by the purposes of God. So get out of this sphere. And that servant walked 500 miles to go find a woman with a God-shaped character and seeking God's cause. And so you may need to be that person who walks 500 miles or walks 500 more just to be the man who walked 1,000 miles to fall down at her shore. You may need to move. Get yourself into a godly stream of people who love the Lord and are pursuing His purposes. You get in a crowd like that, I promise you, you'll be blessed in the doing. That's how I met Donna. I know for me, I went to a couple single things when I was single, and I realized this community wasn't going anywhere. And so I thought, I'm just going to be about the work. I'm going to be about leveraging my singleness for the glory of God. And I got busy working at my church. And as I did that, I would pray, God, I want to meet her in the field. That, man, as you look through the Bible, Boaz met Ruth because Ruth was working. Solomon met the Shulamite, and she was working. That Proverbs 31 woman was working. So I want to get about the work and believe I'm going to find a woman out there working along with me. And sure enough, Donna wasn't at my church, but we were at kind of sister churches. And as I began to help, I was volunteering and working at this youth event, and she was up there leading worship, and she was hot. And it's not wrong to think that. And I thought, wow, that girl's amazing. But I don't know anything about her. She could be a weirdo, but I know the community she's in is pretty amazing. And as I got around that community, that's the other benefit. Community helps with evaluation. That with many counselors, victory is sure. And as I looked around her community, I thought, these are good people. And they all believe she's a good person. And as they told me about her, I saw, hey, she's not wasting her singleness. She's mentoring young girls. She's leading worship. She's serving in missions, a variety of mission organizations around. This girl is getting after it. And I looked and I said, she has the same cause as me. She has a God-shaped character. And then I began to move closer to her and say, hey, and we have chemistry. She makes me laugh. We should get married. Now, there's more to it than that, and that's the next session. How do you begin that courtship? But let me just close by encouraging you with how Paul encouraged young Timothy. He told Timothy, flee youthful lust. Pursue righteousness, love, joy, and peace, along with those who call out to God out of a pure heart. You make the decision, I'm going to pursue the cause of knowing Jesus. And I promise you, you will look around you and see people who have a pure heart in that same pursuit. They want him just as badly as you do. And it's as you run with that crew together, by the grace of God, I believe you'll meet some people there that you're meant to run with for a lifetime. So I encourage you, the general flow of our culture today drifts towards isolation. Resist it. Make the decision now. I am going to swim into the stream of a healthy, vibrant community, believing as we chase a godly cause and are shaped by godly character, I'm going to meet someone with whom I have chemistry, and God will let us run together.